Welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Investor Podcast. It's just me today, no Daniel Foch, but I am joined by someone I'm lucky enough to call a friend. My guest today has worked for firms that shaped skylines that you would recognize. His work has been seen in Dezeen, Toronto Life, the Globe and Mail, and he's become a loud voice in the missing middle and multiplex culture here in Toronto and the big movement and trend. He's one of our speakers and sponsors at our September 15th Unpacking Multiplexes. Not only does he do this for other people, he does this stuff himself. Real money, real dirt. Noam, welcome to the show, man. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be on the show. I've heard the podcast before, so it's a real honor to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to be in the next 35, 40 minutes here because I know you've got a lot to share. So first and foremost, for those of you who aren't familiar with you or what you do, your studio, give me the full pitch, the origin story of where you are now from working at place Foster and Partner to having your own studio, your own design and build studio that does everything from laneway suites to multiplexes. Walk me through it.
Sure. It's a long story, so I'll give you the consolidated version. As you can hear, I'm from England, started off my career in the UK. So the Foster and Partners is a smaller part of my background. I did a couple of internships there when I was younger, just learning the ropes and getting my feet wet in the architectural world. In between my bachelor's and my master's, I went to New York for a year. I worked in New York and I worked at Richard Meier as well, a big, well-renowned architect there. And then did my undergrad in a sort of did my master's in a very well-known university called the Architectural Association in London. I did 2 years in a firm, which is the guy who left Foster and Partners, called Ken Shuttleworth, the company called Make. I had my first 2 years of experience there, became a registered architect, met a Canadian woman, and ended up in Canada shortly after.
That's always how it goes. You didn't come here to single-handedly change the architectural landscape.
Yeah,
it was love that brought you here.
It was far worse than it is today, back in 2014 when I arrived. But there are some better buildings now and a lot more international architects that are building here. So it's evolved a lot since then. To cut a long story short, I had a few different businesses between 2014 and today. And about 3.5 years ago, I launched my own practice, architecture practice, and have been growing ever since. And really, we started in the residential sort of high-end homes, custom homes. And then over the last couple of years, really moved into multiplex, multifamily. We still do a lot of luxury homes and custom homes, but a bigger chunk of our firm has been doing multiplexes, multifamily, ranging from fourplex plus a garden suite all the way to, I think our largest project now is about 30 units on a major street.
30. Wow. That's awesome. I mean, what a breadth of experience. And we're going to get to all, first of all, even if people aren't listening to a word you say, I guess the English accent makes it at least sound nice here. But yeah, there's a lot of questions I want to ask you about that. First and foremost, the difference between living in London and living in Toronto. Both cities, both world-class cities. Some might argue London, obviously, a bit more illustrious, a little bit more of a history there. Coming from a place where missing middle is the norm, right? It's the standard
Correct.
there. I mean, my family's Italian. I go to Italy, usually once a year. And in Rome, it's the same thing, right? You've got streets lined. Everyone knows that the Paris streets are the same. You got these streets lined with these 3 to 5 story buildings. And we don't have that here. Do you think that had an impact on why you decided to make the jump into? Did you kind of inherently maybe know that this was what was working back home in most of Europe?
Look, I think I definitely come with a different perspective. So I've always sort of I'll give you an example here. Even in single family homes, for some reason, there are massive bedrooms where they don't need to be massive. And every custom home has to have a walk-in closet. I don't even think I saw a walk-in closet until I moved to Canada, until I was on vacation or whatever. It's a very luxury concept, but it's become like the norm because there's traditionally so much space here and everyone has space to work with. I think that coming from the UK, I can appreciate the smaller space. Actually, a really funny story was when I first moved here, we were looking for a house and I was searching everywhere. I think I put 20 offers on houses. It was that crazy time in the market, I think 2015, 2016. And eventually I just found a house, after many failed offers and bidding wars. I bought this house. It was a small house, but in my mind, it was like a decent sized house. And my wife didn't even see it because she was like, we were just like
Uh-oh.
exhausted at that point by like just losing out to all these bids. We bid, overbid, we finally got it. And after living there, we realized like this house is tiny. And like in my mind, when I bought it, it was like, this was a normal size house in England. But here, when like compared to everyone around us and all our friends, it was actually a very small house. So like the perspective is, I guess the expectation here is that you need something bigger. But in reality, like you can have a very functional space and a lot smaller square footage. And even
Yeah.
growing up, I remember like a few streets over, there were houses that were converted into like multiplexes, basically duplexes, triplexes. And like the law's a bit different in the UK, so it's much easier to make them into like condos in a way. So this was everywhere. This was like in a lot of the densely built up spaces near where I lived. A lot of these houses were converted into 2, 3 units. So it's pretty common. And then here it's more uncommon because it's much harder to do, or it was traditionally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first, this man's obviously a risk taker buying the home without the wife even see. I like it. Most men would not be so. Most spouses might not be so. I guess if you're married to an architect, that probably, what's, and we've said this on the show before, but I find it you might know this, or at the very least now, it's you've seen it in reality, play it in reality that Canada, Australia, and the USA have the most square footage per person by far outweighing every other country in the world. And if you actually look at the square footage of the American, Canadian, let's say North American house, tag Australia in there as well, the heat map of what's actually used is only probably 30 to 40% of the space in most cases, right? So I think the fact about functionality is huge. Now, that kind of leads this conversation to an interesting. You've done the luxury homes. You've done the multifamily spaces. How much more is like utility come into play when you're doing a multifamily property? Because obviously you want to cater to the family, the larger bedrooms, the nicer finishes, but it has to be so much more in a way utilitarian than just, hey, I want, every bedroom has its own bathroom and a walk-in closet type of vibe.
Correct. And there's this like paradox almost where the rental model seems to make more sense on some like more downtown denser areas, but you don't have a lot of space to work with, right? So a lot of our projects are around 25 feet wide. So we're cramming 3 bedrooms into 25 wide, and they need to be functional. They need to be somewhere that you're going to live. So we have to be creative in how to create this sense of luxury almost, or this sense of comfort with very little space. So utilizing areas under stairs, doing bigger windows to make the space feel bigger and larger. There's like lots of little tricks, or I wouldn't say tricks, but little design in purposeful design details that we build into it to
Yeah.
create this sense of comfort when you're dealing with much smaller spaces. It's you think that you could get a kitchen into, you need a certain size for a kitchen, but really you can get everything within a 10, 12 foot length of space. So then you just have to be purposeful and thoughtful about design, but you can get a lot into small spaces.
Yeah, it's so funny, like bringing again, circling back to your European roots, and again, me myself having a good understanding. If you look at the way that a lot of European flats or apartments are designed, you're fitting almost everything that you'd have in a house that might be an extra 1,000 square feet, a larger hallway,
Yeah.
just space for space's sake kind of thing. So yeah, and it's funny that bringing that over here. And I guess, in the history of homes and housing and the housing economy, we're probably a couple hundred years, at least maybe 50 to 100 years behind Europe. And, moving more in that direction of a bit more of a renter's economy as well, which I think is helping to I don't even call it a trend because it's a real thing that's taking shape. So what are your thoughts on that? And then you're doing one of these projects yourself. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I've always had this prediction that in the future, let's actually scale back. I remember going to an exhibition, I think it was in the Tate in England, in London, Tate Museum, like cities of 2050 and what that entailed.
Cool.
And I remember them as part of the
Flying
exhibition.
cars,
Sorry.
flying cars.
No, it wasn't even that. It was more like the density of how cities are going to evolve. Maybe there was flaggers, I don't remember. But the one thing that stuck out was like, I think 100 years ago, it was only 20% of people lived in cities. And by 2050, I think the prediction was that 75% of people would live in cities. So the
Wow.
idea that everyone can still afford in a city, is evolving because you have so much demand to live in these very small locations, small relatively to the rest of the countries, where this idea of like the individual owning these spaces may actually not be a reality anymore. It's going to be owned by corporations or by landlords or like people that have inherited real estate. So this movement towards like a rental economy is something that seems to be inevitable. But I would take it a step further. I think that Toronto is a weird place because you have single family homes downtown. They're affordable, right? You can still buy a lot for under a million and a half, something like that, for a single family lot in downtown Toronto, which is insane to me. If you think about London, if you think about Paris, New York, any of these places, a brownstone in New York is probably a few $1 million, right? Just for
Oh,
a
easily,
tiny
for
little
sure.
townhouse, relatively, so, down Manhattan. So I think we're still a long way to go to get to this idea of like what this future city is going to be like. Toronto, it's still a little bit behind, as you said. And I think that ultimately those single family houses are now out of place. You get all these NIMBYs complaining about these rentals that are coming into their neighborhood, but really it's single family homes. And this might be controversial to anyone who's listening, but those single family homes are out of place now in the downtown central metropolitan city.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you think, 100, 150 years ago, 50 years ago, in some of the places you just mentioned that there was, opposition and NIMBYs were existed back then? Like, is there, I feel like there's just always been opposite to building, you know what I mean? If you live there,
Yeah.
you're like, I don't want it to change for whatever reason, right? Whether it's property value or shadows or just don't want new people living around. It's funny. I love that thought process, conceptual what these city like the trajectory that we're on. Let's have fun. Well, like, what do you see Toronto like? Let's just, I mean, we don't have to go even, well, 2050 is actually not that far away, which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But let's say even in the next 10 years, right? We're seeing policy change. Yeah, we're kind of like, grinding along the bottom of whatever this recession vibe session thing that we're in right now is. Jobs are maybe going to come back. Immigration is hopefully coming back. It's not always going to be like it is right now. 10 years from now, what do you see the like housing typology? How, like, is this widespread adoption?
It's really interesting. I think with the introduction of AI now as well, and like remote, we're doing this remotely right now. We're not in person. I think there is that. It's a weird situation because on the one hand, you have this like sort of remote economy where people can work remotely. You don't have to come in person. But on the other hand, you're missing this like sense of place. You're missing experiences. You're missing like the density of being around people. So I think that
100%.
it's hard to predict. I don't know because obviously, yeah, AI is evolving so quickly, and like all these jobs potentially are also at risk. A lot of these downtown desk jobs as well. But I do think people are still looking for these communities and experience and density. Like walking through London on a typical day or New York or wherever, you have this like vibe, and it's something that people pay money to be around. Especially the younger generation. Maybe as you get a bit older, you want a bit more peace and quiet in the suburbs and whatnot. But I think that there is something electrifying about being in a big metropolitan city, and hopefully that will
Yeah.
continue, and people will continue to experience the public space and the everything that comes with a big downtown international city.
I couldn't agree more. It's almost like that on feeling that you get. And yeah, and then the ability to, go to amazing restaurants and have transit and be close to
Yeah,
friends. And yeah, there's just, listen, downtown living is not for everybody, but I don't think Toronto's going in. If I had kind of make a prediction, let's say 10 years from now, even with, I believe is going to be reflective of what happened with the invention of the internet. Yes, there's, a much larger shakeup than there was back then. Of course there is. But it's going to create a whole bunch of new things for us to do. So I agree. I think that there will be maybe an exodus of some office space, but if people are live downtown for a lot of other reasons than
yeah,
just being close to office work, right? So I would hope to see, a lot more of these types of missing middle and multiplex properties throughout the city, especially in the neighborhoods that are amazing for young people or even young families to grow up in. So let's use that to pivot to some of the projects that you've done for other people. And then I know you've got your own deal on the go to. Let's spend some time on that. Walk us through, I mean, because this is something that's so important. If you're going to, you got to put your money where your mouth is, right?
exactly, exactly.
right? Like,
Yes, I
this is
mean,
why I wanted you to speak at our event because I'm like, not only do you help others do this, you're doing it yourself. You know all of the red tape and the fees and the power team that you need and the anyways, you know all the stuff. Tell me everything.
yeah, it's what you said, practice what you preach. I do think that the market for missing middle is a good opportunity. I'm doing it myself, as you said, and I'm actually GCing it myself as well. So I'm really in the nuts and bolts, no pun intended, of this situation, or pun intended, I should say. So I think there's some real value in being on site and seeing these actually get built. So a lot of architects, great in theory, and there's always this conflict between the architect and the builder, because the builder's like, this is how you actually build it. And the architect is like, this is what we would like it to look like. And we'd like it to build it. In reality, things don't always line up. So I think there's a lot of value in me doing this myself. And I found that also by going through this process and being on the development side, I'm actually able to find ways to bring the costs down as well. That's obviously a big
Yeah.
factor for developers. And as a developer, I guess myself, that's something we're always looking to value engineer. How can we bring the cost down to make this a more profitable venture? So a few examples. In the early days, you would have seen a lot of these big staircases potentially at the back, the secondary staircases.
Yep.
That's to provide like a second means of egress. So we don't design any of our multiplexes like that anymore. All our multiplexes basically have direct egress to every unit, direct access, and that eliminates the need for a secondary staircase. That staircase can cost you between 50 and 70 grand, right? So
And
those
they're
are little
hideous in most
things.
cases. They're
Sorry,
terrible
sorry.
looking in most well, they're just terrible looking in some
And they're
cases
ugly,
too. It's
extremely
oh
ugly.
man. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no. So I was just going to say that's just one example of where we've been able to bring the cost down. The other thing that we've started implementing is soundproofing is the biggest, or sorry, sound is the biggest reason that tenants leave. And obviously you want some longevity when you have tenants. So we've really invested into soundproofing between units. We put like a concrete layer of a concrete floor basically on our wood frame structure. We're adding additional sound insulation. So these are little things that as I've been developing and seeing firsthand what the impacts are, we're implementing these in our projects for clients as well.
There you go. I almost don't want you to say anymore because I don't want to give you away all your secrets on the show here. That's incredible. I mean, I can personally say, having lived in kind of multiplex properties, right? Even the place I'm currently recording this podcast from is a triplex converted old century home. I've I could be playing very loud music up here, and the person downstairs or behind me would not be able to hear that. And there's been screaming babies that I can only hear once I'm outside of the building when the windows are open and I can't hear it upstairs. These are things that matter, like it's paramount. And as we've talked a lot about this on the show, once you've built out one of these multiplexes, then a whole nother job starts, right? Now you're a business owner, you're a property owner, you're a landlord, you've got tenant management. If you went from having no tenants to then all of a sudden owning a fiveplex, whether you live there or not, and you've got four others or five, you got to think about this kind of stuff. Tenants are the real asset because you can place bad people in there and you'll be dealing with them for months with financial issues or do damage to the property and cause other tenants duress, and then it's just a negative feedback loop and it's just absolutely terrible to do. Walk me through some of the biggest challenges that you've had, whether it's with clients' projects or with your own project, or if you're kind of noticing some of the same challenges time and time again.
Yeah, really the main challenge we've had, and the city of Toronto amazing in some aspects, but there's been a lot of
How did I know
bottlenecks.
we were going there?
There's been a lot of bottlenecks at the city, unfortunately. I'm dealing with this right now. I have 3 committee adjustments next week. One of them has been an absolute nightmare to get to, just to get to that point. And I was putting together my presentation for it, and I noticed that one of the variances that were flagged by the zoning examiner is not actually a variance. So I had to go now back again to the city to ask them to remove that so that I can eliminate that from my presentation. It's just like a lot of these little mistakes and a little these like frustrations. That is for me the biggest headache with these projects. I think early on the city didn't really know how to interpret the code based on these projects as well. So I would say in our first 7 to 8 projects, we were going in with the same detail, or we were going in with one detail was approved and then it wasn't approved on the next project. For like mainly if any architects are listening, they're going to know about the the wall and floor connection, basically, which has become very controversial in the city, and just their interpretation of that building code element to it. That's been the biggest frustration. Otherwise, like, I think these are relatively easy. Like, I'm making the permitting process sound difficult. It's actually not. It's pretty easy. It's just these little moments of interaction.
Yeah.
But overall, very smooth, very high success rate at committee of adjustment. I'm finding that the city are very pro development as well. So they're really pushing these forward. And even with a few variances, they would tend to be quite supportive. We had one project where we had 42 signatories against, basically some WhatsApp group in the neighborhood managed to rally up
Oh
42
dear.
neighbors to sign against our project, and the committee were unanimously supportive. So I don't think the
That's
NIMBYism
awesome.
doesn't matter so much anymore, but overall, it's been a pretty good experience.
If you could bend the ear of a, the hand that writes the policy, the mayor, or, if you could go in there and be mayor for a day and just one sweeping, what would you change? I mean, I just keep on the committee of adjustments or the zoning process or the permitting process. It's all the red tape style stuff and, rezoned SPA, SEA, like it's just all this stuff that takes from the financing side. I've got a client that just came in who is literally like, we're taking out a second mortgage for just for him to be able to wait for more units, kind of thing, right? Like this stuff is it's I hear what you're saying. I love it. It's inspiring. I speak to a lot of developers as part of my job, and I think they would all say something similar. Right? It's the city. If it's not one thing, it's another. If it's the miscommunication, so if you could go, wave the magic wand, what do you think is the biggest change that needs to be made? And, feel free to throw a couple others in there if you need to.
Yeah. So I think we could have a whole separate podcast on this, to be honest.
Oh God, I bet.
But
Yeah.
look, I actually met with the mayor probably 4 or 5 months ago. There was a small group of us invited to meet with her and actually give her our feedback. One of the things I mentioned was this idea of this inconsistency in the city. So you go in, it happened actually recently, and I posted about this, where we've been using the same same wall type on all our multiplex projects, probably over 25 projects. And we had one examiner that decided that she wouldn't accept this wall type. And we showed her documentation that this is permitted. She would not accept it. So we had to come up with a different wall type. And it probably delayed the application by about 2 weeks, this back and forth. And it's like, if you're accepting it on one project, why are you not accepting it on another project? It doesn't make any sense. Another
Are there
situation.
just no like standards? Are there no standards there or like what is that? Is that no standards? Is that no
Well, I
communication?
think that's
Like
the
why?
issue. Yeah, so I think that's the issue. Like when law is codified, there's a precedent for it, and people refer to that. It should be the same thing with bylaws or with interpretation of the OBC, whatever it is. There's been so many cases where one examiner has accepted something and another has not. And then you're referring to that, like the balance is you don't want to give them all those projects in case they were like, okay, now they're going back to those projects saying they're not accepted either. So you have to find that balance. I think that's the biggest frustration, is like the consistency of things and like the communication between the different departments at the city. There seems to be a little bit of a lack of communication. So you're getting information from zoning, but different information from building. They're not talking to each other. I think that's where there's a little bit of frustration.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend the whole podcast bashing them, because I do think that they have come a long way in promoting multifamily homes and promoting more density and the change of bylaws. But I think that their processes need to be improved. And from what I understand, they are implementing some sort of AI review or something. There seems to be some innovation somewhere that back there.
Good.
Sometime
Good.
hopefully will get implemented.
Yeah.
But that
Hey,
is
look,
the biggest
it's
frustration, and the same with my colleagues
yeah.
I speak to. Like, it's just the same things that keep coming up.
Yeah.
And like one idea, just to keep blabbering on about this a bit more, one idea about that, I thought we could do two things. One is when a decision gets made based on like an alternative solution. So there's two ways to apply the code. One is like what's actually written in the code, and one is coming up with an alternative solution that you can demonstrate that you're meeting the intent of the code, basically. Alternative solution requires like a long letter. It's a bit complicated. You have to apply certain aspects of the code. But what I would like to see is, once an alternative solution is accepted, it should be publicized so that anyone can use that same alternative solution. Otherwise, you have to keep spinning your wheels to try and get certain things
Yeah,
approved
open
when they're
source
already
it.
approved.
That's great. Yes. Yeah, I love that.
So yeah,
Okay, well,
that's the summary.
gnome
I could
gnome for
probably go on for
council.
this
Here we
hours,
go.
but
No gnome for mayor. Let's go.
no, no, no.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, again, obviously you and I are both part of the community here. This is the number one complaint, and I want to, as I said, I don't want to be bashing. They're actually, Toronto, the city of Toronto is going to be involved in our September 15th. You'll see them there, which is great. We love and need the city to be involved in this kind of stuff. Like, absolutely, they are, if not probably the most important entity that exists in the entire process, right? But let's talk about some of the other entities that exist in this whole process. No, I want you to go into detail the services that you provide, from architecture to design, project management, but then also I want you to tell me, just because I love reiterating this for our listeners, how many other people are involved in the process, from financing to appraisals to what happens afterwards. Like, who else are you
Yes.
working with? Who else do you touch and feel on a project?
No, I mean, it's a broad. Depends. Are you coming from the planning and building side, or are you coming from the overall scope of
All
it?
angles,
Yeah,
everybody,
I mean,
let's
there's a
do it.
lot. So obviously, from the planning side, you've got myself you got the architect, you have surveyor. We need to get a survey of the site. Arborist potentially if you have trees. Mechanical engineer, structural engineer, energy efficiency consultant if you're doing MLI Select.
Which you probably are, let's be real. Yeah.
Sorry.
Says, but you probably are, let's be real
Yeah,
about that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then if you go the accessibility route, you also have an accessibility consultant potentially. On more complex projects, you might hire an independent planner or a planning lawyer. Most of the planning we do in house, but on like major streets projects, we usually bring in a planner. And then on the financing side, so well, if you're doing it with partners, you need lawyers to put together your agreements. You need a real estate lawyer for closing. You're going to need potentially an accountant or an HST rebate sort of consultant.
Specialist. Yeah.
The list goes on. You need an appraiser. You need what else? I'm actually putting together for your event a little brochure or like a directory of all these people with actual people that people can actually contact if they need. So like a one-stop shop where everything is written, so you know where to look. Basically, there's a lot. I'm sure there's more that I think of off the top of my head, like maybe a civil engineer on some cases. Anyway, the
I
list
mean,
goes on.
GC, project manager, construction manager,
Yeah, it's the whole
real
construction side.
estate agent at
Right.
some point, property manager eventually, lawyer if you're going to condominiums. I mean, like, and this is the point I'm trying. What was that? That was a football team, right? Worth of brain power, right? And each one of those people has to understand to a certain extent what the other one does and where they fit in the process. And each one of those jobs has to be done correctly, because one mistake along the way and it can result in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of, whether it be time, materials, a number of different, it's just so important to be able to put together that correct team. And that's awesome that you have that. I mean, that's basically what the event is going to be in itself, right? It's like, hey, like, anyone that you need is likely in this room. So, if you're listening and you're trying to figure out, should I do this to my place in Toronto? I either own something or I have enough money and want to buy something. And I believe that Toronto is going to keep growing and become, more and more of the world class that it's destined to be. Come and check it out. No, I want to start to wrap things up with your take on the market, take on the citizen developer, and for those people out there maybe getting started, considering doing this themselves. Like, who are you working with right now? What advice are you giving? Where do you see things going?
Yes, we have quite a few citizen developers in our like list of clients. I'm finding that there's people. It seems to be people in that industry. But actually, I had a discussion this morning with someone who's like has nothing to do with real estate, who has a lot that's 65 wide. He wants to maybe sever it, put two multiplexes. My advice to him actually this morning was like, don't start on the major streets projects if you've never done this before.
Yeah.
Do a fourplex plus a garden suite or a sixplex. It's still not an easy project, but it's definitely an easier way in if you want to start doing these multiplexes. I would say most of our clients are citizen developers, essentially. One of my biggest clients, who we have probably 8 or 9 projects with, the two of them left their corporate jobs to do this like full time, and now they're doing it.
Love
And,
that. Yeah.
I think altogether, they're using us for about 7 or 8. They probably have about 15 altogether. So they're really aggressively doing this as a business. My advice is start slow and ramp up and learn from your mistakes as you go along. And our job is to limit your mistakes, but as you do this yourself, especially on the construction side, I think one of the biggest things is to find a good contractor if you're not doing the GCing yourself. That's where really you're making your money. As long as you can build it under a certain price per foot, you're going to make money. As soon as you exceed that, you're killing your margins. And that's like probably the most important aspect of this whole process.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, and it's funny because I think that's something that is probably one of the hardest things for people to accomplish, especially if you're going depending on what kind of finances you're getting to build it, right? Because if you're trying to use CMHC, MLI select construction financing, you need a builder, or you need yourself as the builder need to have the experience in projects of that nature, not to mention the net worth and liquidity, but you need to have experience. So if you don't have that, you need to go find someone that does. And that's why we see a lot of builder, LP type partnerships with, homeowners vending their homes in or
Exactly.
invest. Yeah, just kind of being like, hey, I want to do this. And let's do it together. The builder comes in, and you're right. Especially if the builder can, let's just say there's little tricks on my end as well. We'll leave it at that. But let's just say it really is helpful to have a builder on board. But again, I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that it's a dangerous game to play. I'm gonna be builder, right? Like if I'm a real estate investor, I did a basement suite. I know how this stuff
Yeah,
goes. It came to
yeah.
that. I built a single family home at one point, or I watched a lot of HGTV, whatever it may be, right? This is, yeah, like Noam's talking about savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which very exciting for a lot of people that thought of it. But you can screw things up so badly that you can end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or losing out on.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely a
you
risky
definitely
game.
got to know what you're doing, and maybe
Yeah,
it's like worth like exploring a partnership with a builder where they're
yeah.
incentivized, you're incentivized to keep the cost down. That's really the challenge here. The margins are not big, so if you screw up, then it could be catastrophic for your project, right?
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is why it's so important to go with the right team and have that realistic understanding of what tenants am I trying to attract? What are the realistic rental numbers? What are the realistic costs here? And really have that entire thing put together. Noam, I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving away such amazing information. As I said, I almost had to stop you there because I didn't want to give away all your tips and tricks here. You can come meet Noam and see him speak at our September 15th event, Unpacking Multiplexes at the Terminal Theater. Man, this place is cool. I think you as an architect, design guy, this place is like blue carpet, blue lights, blue leather wall. It's interesting, a little art deco. No, for people that might want to work with you, hire you, call you and have a phone call, where can they do that? And then just again, remind everyone exactly what kind of services you offer, because I know you do many different
Sure,
things.
sure. Yeah, so you can go to our website, noamhazan.com, and basically there's a contact us. We can schedule a 20-minute like free consultation. I also have a zoning tool, by the way, on our website. So if you are looking at are you
Oh, there
looking
you
at a
go.
property and you want to know what it's zoned for, you can type in the address, put in the lot dimensions, and you can generate like a very basic zoning report. So we take the project from day one. Like we're pretty much the first person, besides maybe your financing and your real estate agent, we're the first person you should get in touch with. And we'll take you from concept all the way through your planning, committee of adjustment if needed, until you get your permits in hand. And then once we get the permits in hand, we'll hand that over to your contractor or to you, whoever's doing the build. And then we'll also help you review contractor quotes and tender out your contracting portion as well. So really everything up to the build or to the hole in the ground, basically, we hand off and then we move into a supportive role until the end of the project. So we basically get the keys and rent it out. And we're there to support the remainder of the project from that point onwards.
Amazing. Such good stuff today, man. What a great service offering. I want to thank you again. We'll see you in September.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Nick. Great to be here.